Night with Barry, talking about UFO photos and footage and the analysis of them. So I think that's all I've got. Yes, it is. So I'm going to hand you now over to Barry.
Thank you.
Just get ready,
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. This is a bit of a rush presentation, but it was our last meeting, and we needed to fill a bit of a space. So
what an introduction.
Here I am. Okay, now photo and video analysis and enhancements. I was introduced to this aspect of UFO really back in the 1970s, where I took a black and white photo of a UFO up in the Blue Mountains. Because then it was film, no video, and with darkroom equipment I tried to get the best photo or result of this image that I had, so I was able to enlarge the image onto another piece of negative where I had the full negative of the object, and unfortunately I haven't got it here with me, but it's working with film, and this is the aspects of analysis that you really need to do, is gathering the evidence. We have various means of gathering evidence, which I'll go into. The best equipment to use if you're looking to gather the evidence for yourself, and software that could be used. I'm not going to name particular software. Well, there's one software I can use, but it's current, because unfortunately with the Windows system moving from 32-bit to 64-bit, some of the software that I was using to get the results you'll see here just doesn't function on 64-bit Windows, so, and it's also not available anymore, so it's the end of the process there, so it's not easy to find the right software to do what you want to do. The process, what steps you go through and what you're actually trying to achieve with a photo that's a possible UFO, whether it's a digital photo, a film photo, or a digital video, or the old analog type video. There's different processes that you use to access the data that's embedded in the image, and that's where you're looking for. The data speaks for itself, and this is the decision based on the data. So the thing is just to go in with the images with an open mind and try and dig out what does the data tell me, and the testing procedures that you need to discover, and sometimes you know, like you may be breaking ground with new software, or software that you can adapt to get this data to say something to you, give you the story of what the image is. So to take, you can take your own, which is the ideal if you're a sky watcher and you're interested in the UFOs, and you want to get your own images so that you can show other people what's going on, or just work on your own images and gather the evidence yourself, is the ideal way to do it. And the best time to increase your chances of success is something that you need to learn, which is monitoring web pages and people like UFO Research Queensland that post good sightings up on their Facebook page in particular, or on their website, and be aware of what's happening around in the skies, because they're not here all the time. I'll cover that in depth a little bit later. And the suitable equipment, it's you can't gather the information unless you've got the equipment that's capable of capturing an image, because they're usually not up close. They're at some distance, so you have to really, and sometimes moving quickly. You might accidentally catch something, or you might capture something that's so small you can't get any detail from, which is quite common. But I've got some photos and some images that I can show you what I've had better success with in the 90s. And you can use other people's captures, but you can't sort of publish them, of course, but you can. There's plenty of other people's captures available on web pages and blog pages and Facebook even sometimes, and you can use their image and play around with various software and try yourself to try and see what's inside the bright illumination, if it's only a bright illumination, or an object like that aircraft, is to zoom in as best you can without pixelizing it too much, and enhancing it to try and see the features on the object. That's the whole aim of it. And so that we can say, well, it's a man-made object, or it's an object that can't be explained. And the methods of analysis depends on what equipment you have to work with and the images or the video that you're trying to work on. So there's a little bit involved in just understanding the processes and what you're trying to achieve with enhancement of possible UFO video or photos. Now, the UFO is not around. If you want to do is capture your own, or you want to skywatch and capture your own, the UFO is not around all the time, which is it's basic knowledge, but you have to be aware that you're not just going to go out and shoot a UFO with a camera, I mean. And so you have to monitor the UFO reporting media for current reports. It's the best way, so that when you see the activity starting to happen, and you know it doesn't sound like a normal aircraft to me, there's activity happening. And if you see one yourself, there's a possibility, a high probability, that there's going to be a lot more there. There's going to be, if you see one, there's more around, because they come in waves and flaps. And I experienced a few of these in the 90s when I was living in Grafton, New South Wales. The sky was full of UFOs at certain stages, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have that experience and capture quite a bit on video. And I'll show you what the poor success rate I had with film 35mm film, because caught unaware, of course, but tried to do the best I could with the equipment. So today we have much better equipment in digital video cameras and that. So if you're going to get a video camera to try and hope to get UFOs, you've got to have some with certain features that will make your job a lot easier. So outside is where the UFOs are. You won't see them when you're sitting inside watching TV. So it pays to, like if you want to be a sky watcher, which is the only way you'll see UFOs unless you see one accidentally, is to spend a little time out there and get familiar with the environment. And when you see and familiar with aircraft, satellites, and normal birds flying at night and all that, and once you're familiar with all the natural things, when the real things start to happen, the UFO comes, you'll know the difference, because you're familiar. You'll say, well, I'm not familiar with that, but the other stuff I am. So it's all built, it's a building up of your personal experience of what's in the sky and flying around. It takes a bit of time and patience, but if you're patient and persistent, you'll get results. You know, it might take you 12 months, might take you 2 years, but to see a UFO flap or wave in progress is worth the wait. Now, there's suitable equipment for photos. The film, you can use film today, but you have to send it away, get processed, unless you know somebody that's in the business of processing black and white, which what I used to do with for high-speed black and white film that I was able to force process. It's a much higher resolution than digital cameras, so you get a much clearer picture, but you have to have a pretty good zoom to make it worthwhile. So, and the high shutter speed, it's all there. If you're a bit of photography, you would understand this. You need a high shutter speed so that you stop motion blur. The things that will destroy a good UFO photo is motion blur and out of focus. If the digital image data is polluted with out of focus image or motion blur, you have a pretty tough time to try and successfully analyse what's on it. So it's important that if you're going to, if a group of people or you're going to try your own, is to have fast shutter speed and stop the motion blur and sharp focus. And the bridge camera, which is the little point, not so much a point and shoot, but the bridge is one step under the digital SLR cameras. They've got super zooms, and they're excellent as long as the zoom will stay in focus. So a manual focus is also an essential item to have on your video camera, so that just for example, at night time or a small object in a blue sky is very hard for the automatic focus to focus on, because it searches and zooms in and out to try and establish a focus on that very small point of light or object in a vast blue sky or a nighttime black sky. So manual focus you can set, and you know you're going to be on it straight away. I like the film cameras, not the film cameras, the 8mm analog cameras that had the 8mm or the miniature 8 film, the cassettes. I like them because they got manual focus. They got 1/10,000 shutter speed. You could alter all that, and you can set your camera up really good. But a lot of this, the 4K cameras of today, they might be a very sharp image, but they're a bit useless for sky watching because they don't have manual focus, and you've got to be able to have a viewfinder that you can look through rather than the monitor on the back. So there's, you know, the latest cameras are not always most beneficial, the high-tech stuff for doing the filming UFOs, because of those features. They lack that essential manual zoom and easy options to pick up a small object in a blue sky or a dark sky. And a steady tripod is what you really need if you're going to follow a UFO for any distance, because sometimes you get the opportunity, you can follow a UFO that's moving slow enough to be able to film it for, I've filmed one for 20 minutes, a single object in daytime. I've got a bit of footage to show you there. And if you get a steady shot, you can zoom in, you can get more detail, and you can more chances of finding out what the object actually looks like. Infrared cameras are another choice for sky watchers to photograph or film UFOs, because the infrared is not pure infrared, it's a near infrared, which will show up very sensitive to light. So you got more chance of seeing a dim object in a night sky. In the daytime infrared, you'll also get a white object with green. It gives you the green effect. They show up brighter because the infrared, if the object has a bit of heat or low brightness, it will brighten it up, so easier to see, but a bit harder to get the detail out of it because it sort of blows a bit with the brightness. The full spectrum is like a FLIR. They call it FLIR. It's a coloured infrared, and the Ghostbusters use them when they're doing paranormal work. And if a ghost appears in the film, it's a dark object because it's cooler than the surrounding the people that are there or the surrounding area. So it's a dark figure that moves. So it's a little bit reverse, unless it's a security camera that's attached to a military helicopter or the police. They have their FLIR cameras, but it's the images or the data is converted to a cathode ray tube. Yeah, it's converted into a different format, and it picks up heat, so they can follow a crook's footsteps in the ground because it's sensitive to heat. So it's a different thing, but they're pretty expensive. So you can go into, as long as you if you're going to get a camera, study the different types of cameras and what they can offer, and do a bit of research of the type of camera you need if you want to do it yourself. With video, as I said, the super zoom is a handy aspect of it, manual focus and fast shutter there as well. And the iPhone or the smartphones, if they got a 240 frames per second, which is a slow motion, you get a much sharper image. It might be very slow, but you get a much sharper image. And we had a photo, a bit of video sent in by a guy that filmed. He was filming lightning strikes in his on his property at 240 frames a second on his iPhone, And when he watched it back, he saw this object flying around, and he sent it into us and said, well, can you identify what this is? It was not flapping wings or anything. And we calculated that it flew 150 metres in 3 seconds, which is 600 kilometres an hour. And with a naked eye, you wouldn't see it, you know. And it was a small object, and he's got another bit of footage he sent us, and it went up into over the trees, and it just kept on going out of sight, and just went and within seconds. So with a fast or with a slow motion camera, it's doing 240 frames a second, but you can capture things that you don't see with your naked eye, and I've done that. There's on our YouTube channel, there's a small object that goes, there's an aircraft, commercial aircraft, and this object goes through, and I estimated it, I forget what it was now, 30-something thousand kilometres an hour, or 3,000, something like that. I just forget now, but you'll pick up things that, and I've got one from the Northern Territory here at Alice Springs, a lady with a smartphone videoed one that's full of unidentified objects, but she didn't see it with the naked eye. So you can do it with your smartphone, but it's good if you can use the higher, and you can get to that through your settings. If you're using other people's captures just to get a bit of a, you know, get some software together, get some experience together, social media, web pages, YouTube, and people, if they send you images, or someone you know has got an image that you're talking about, you grab that and put it on your computer and just experiment yourself. And hopefully, you know, you can always contact us normally, and we'll help you out if you get that opportunity. Now, methods of analysis. First, you have to digitise the information, because you're going to be working on it on computer. Digitised images, you can stop one frame at a time, and you can zoom in. Now, for video footage, if it's a handheld camera, which is 99% of the footage that's taken, because it's all of a sudden, oh, I've got to get my camera ready and do it, because sometimes you haven't got long to do it, it's stabilization of the video footage. I used to have a program that was given to me by someone that saw the work I was doing. It wasn't a commercial program, and it worked beautifully, and I was able to stabilise a lot of footage. And once you stabilise it, you've got a chance to zoom right into it and get a better chance of to see what is actually making this bright illumination, if it's a bright illumination, or the details on an object. And there's Adobe After Effects is being used now. It's an expensive program, but there's a guy, Jason Bales in America, he's a sky watcher over there, and he's using Adobe After Effects to stabilise his footage. He does a great job, and when he's on an object, he sticks with it, and that's what a sky watcher should do. When you've got a UFO in your sights, you just don't zoom in, out. His focus is spot on, and he just tracks it. It's a good example of how a professional sky watcher captures footage. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the sky watchers in the 90s in Australia, the only sky watcher getting UFO footage, and I was exchanging it with a few of the American sky watchers, and all the footage that was seen on TV and all that was footage that, and in documentaries, was our footage. And and then video cameras became more available, and everybody started doing it, and you know, it grew from there. But in '96 was when it first started. Video cameras became accessible to the general public, and I got one of the first Sony night shot cameras, which was a near infrared, and that was what I took most of my footage with at night time. It was a great little camera, and I wore it out. One day it just died. So unfortunately I threw it out. It's probably a collector's piece by now, but anyway. But that's what you use, what you got and what you can afford to get. And then to maintain, if you can stabilise your footage or get someone to do it for you, or learn how to do it, maintain the highest resolution by saving all your images in TIFF or bitmap format, because they're non-compressed, so you don't lose any data once you've saved it. And to do the digital zooming, which is the ideal way to do it, I used a fractal piece of software which you zoomed in a bit, and instead of pixelizing, which was one of those photos of the Irish UFOs, colour one in the left top corner was very pixelized. That was done with false colour enhancing, but you can't do that doesn't mean anything because it was all pixelized. And with the fractal zooming, you could zoom in, and the pixels, instead of getting larger and larger, they would break down and they'd multiply, and they'd take on the similar effect of the data that was in the pixel next to it. So it was like you could zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, and not get pixelization. It was amazing. And there was a place in America that was charging quite a lot of money to use this on images, because it was a military grade type of equipment, you know. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have access to that piece of software, but it doesn't work on 64-bit computers, unfortunately. But I'll show you some results that I did using that method. And then once you got the digital image zoomed right in to fill the frame of whatever this object was, to see if there's a corona, anything around it, or anything within the object, was false colour enhancement. And NASA used this effect with their comets. If you see NASA's got a comet or something that they're displaying on their web page, all the different colours and the bands of different colours, that's called false colour enhancement. And what that does, it doesn't alter the actual data in the image. It takes into account the density and the size of the data as it varies from the object. The object might be glowing in the centre, and the hot spot in the centre with the adjustments, you adjust it so that there's no hard and fast rules about it, but you adjust it to try and show the clearest differentiation between the different depths or brightnesses of the object, and they turn different colours. It's just the way the software works. And I'll show you some examples of that. And that was able to identify, you know, something that was not man-made, unexplainable, didn't have wings, didn't have a power, any identification that showed up as propulsion, like exhaust heat or anything like that. And it also was able to prove that some footage was man-made and not UFO, which is a very important aspect of doing the whole process. But one of the main things is experience. Ideal experience is seeing the objects yourself where you can film them, and then putting them on your computer and doing the tests so that you know that object looks like that on computer. Then someone else sends a photo in that looks similar. Well, I know that's a bird or whatever, because you've had a close look at one of those things, the motion blur, you can see the shape of the beak and all that, or the wings are flapping, or it helps to identify objects. And the experience you just can't buy. You've got to work with it, and you've got to compare and put it to the real hard test. And that's why, if you're interested in this part of the subject, you get other people's images and known UFOs, see what you can do with it, or known hoaxes, see what you can do with it. I've did a lot with video, and there's some objects that were accepted as UFOs, and I was able to demonstrate that they were man-made with candles and garbage bags with flames going out the middle, and I've got some stuff to show you there. So experience is what's necessary, and not a lot of people have the opportunity to see the objects, video themselves, and then put it to the test. During the 90s, there was a worldwide wave of UFO activity. Around the world had disc activity, there was large boomerang-shaped craft, all sorts of UFOs, all different types. And Australia, I was like living in Grafton, and they were going up and down the coast with like a corridor of when they were moving north and south. And within that corridor there's certain flight paths, and right over Grafton was a flight path. And I had reports because my name was in the newspaper, and people that rang up wanted to know where to report a UFO used to ring me up. So I had a lot of reports, and I was able to keep track of all this. And from Coffs Harbour on the coast to the Great Dividing Range, that was the corridor, and the UFOs were using that to fly up and down the east coast of Australia. So I tried with 35mm film, and because that's all I had at the time, and I tried different aspects. I'll show you some results. And 8mm video, which is I eventually got one of my own cameras, and that's when I started to film a bit. So the 35mm, I had a my camera was just a fairly good Minolta camera, and the lens I had was only a 55mm. It wasn't a powerful zoom or anything, and I had 400 ISO colour print film in it. So, and I knew that it, with my experience in photography, I knew that if I took anything slower than a 30th of a second shutter speed, I was going to get motion blur. I didn't want motion blur, I wanted a sharp image. So here I am taking UFOs at night time at a 30th of a second and hoping I can recover some data out of it of what these objects were. And one night we just had probably 3 days of showery rain, and it was an high overcast sky. And there was and I still went out and had a look, and there was a UFO flap happening, and that's what this one here is. That's a disc. I could only see that light there was the illumination that I saw, and that is a disc leaving a heat trail behind it. And the blue is the overcast sky behind the UFO. They were flying under the cloud, and that had to be. When I photographed these, I took them in and get them processed at the usual. It was a privately owned photo developing place. I knew the guy there, and I said, "I've got some interesting stuff on film here. If I like that, be careful how you process it, you know." And when I got them back on a print, because it was print film, photo, nothing there, you know, like nothing on any of them. I said, "Oh man, I know I photographed them," so I had to. That's when I bought a computer, my first computer. They were $2.5 grand or something like that. Only big 500 megabyte hard drive, you know, 4 megabyte of RAM. Yeah, they were big computers, you know. Like, no, I don't want a 14-inch monitor. I want a 15-inch monitor, you know. Like, you know what I mean? 2.5 grand. Okay, I'll pay that off. Anyway, then I sort of dig around. What software do I need? And I'm starting from scratch, because this is 1996. Personal computers were only just becoming available to the public. Internet's just brand new. Nobody is doing this sort of stuff anywhere. Anyway, so I searched high and low and tried various softwares, and started to get some results. And one of the first images I did, I rendered it. I did some work on it, I rendered it, and half an hour later I think, oh shit, I've broken my computer. It's broken, it's not going to do anything, you know. Anyway, it was just that it was so much information. 4 megabyte of RAM was just not enough, you know. Anyway, I got these results, and there's another one at night. All I saw was the bright illumination here, but that's the actual UFO there, a disc, and behind it it's got those red. It's a vapor trail of probably heat or energy trailing behind the UFO. And there's a great little bit of video from Mexico when one of the first lots of video footage come out, daytime footage, out of Mexico during this time. And they got a daytime UFO that's moving through the sky, showing this heat trail, the same. And I was able to dig this out of the emulsion of the photo. So I bought a scanner, a digital scanner, you know, like it was like a printer. It's not like a flatbed scanner. They were $3,000 or something at that period of time. Like, I wasn't going to pay that much money, you know. Well, it might have been $1,500. Anyway, I spent $500 enough for me, and I bought one that you feed it through like a printer, the photo. So that's what I did with these. I scanned the photos in to digitise them, and I got the fractal zooming software, and I was able to zoom in and have a close look at all the information, and then faintly I could see an image like that, or these images in it. So I thought, well, that must be it, because they weren't brilliantly illuminated, you know. And so I just kept on working with the false colour enhancing software and the super zooming with the fractal, and I was able to get this information out. This particular one here, I'd go out with my, I had a fractal grating. What's that grating called? Oh, it's a grating that you put across your camera, as spectrum grating or something like that. And it's on a 35mm slide. I carried it around from the 1970s. Anyway, I put it on the end of the lens of the still camera, and I thought, well, I'd see if I can get a spectrum of one of these objects so I can send it away to get analysed of what material it's made of and what temperature is at, because of the type of spectrum it might shoot. Anyway, I just walked out the back, and there's about 4 UFOs. Anyway, I looked out, and just across the street, over across the houses, there's these 4 UFOs at rooftop height. So holy mackerel, I took a few photos of that. Anyway, the spectrum wasn't in the photo, because normally to take the spectrum at that range I would have had to go off the objects so that I could see the spectrum, and but I wanted to capture these objects. Anyway, that's what they turned out like, with a bit of false colour enhancing. They're leaving this trail behind them again, and they looked like to be spheres and leaving this energy trail behind them. And they were so close, you know, like if I had a video camera during that period of time, I'd have some amazing stuff to show you. This one here, there was this, and another one there, big, fairly big, and I could only see that bright light. But that's the clouds, and that's silhouetted against the clouds. If it was a black, clear, cloudless night, I wouldn't have probably got that silhouette, so I wouldn't have known what they were, just bright light. So with film, it's, unless you can scan high resolution with a desktop flatbed scanner, you can do that, but you get higher resolution. It's a good process if you've got that equipment. Some of the video footage now, it's just like, this is not a full-blown presentation, it's just an introduction into what we can do with video and photo enhancement. This was a UFO. I heard it's just this in Grafton in the daytime, and I heard a military aircraft somewhere. I couldn't lay my eyes on it, but it was somewhere close. So that made me look up at the sky, and I spotted this bright object coming in from the south, and it only looked about 3,000 feet altitude, which is just below the cloud base. And I don't know where the military aircraft went, but it didn't show up again. Whether it was aware this was there, I don't know. Okay, this was a 20-minute sighting, so I'll show you what I did to enhance this, to find some information from this. So that's the cloud moving slowly to the east, and this object is moving. The camera's on tripod. I was able to trace the flight path using this method here to see how stable or unstable this object was, thinking, is it a weather balloon or something that's just blowing in the wind, being the same distance. But the different flight trails show, well, it was a very bright silver-like reflection of a mirror. So I knew it wasn't a weather balloon, but this sort of was, I was able to follow the movement of it, so you could tell that it's changed speed and changed direction in its slow manoeuvring, meandering right over Grafton. And I heard no other reports of this either, and my phone number is there for people that wanted to report sightings. Anyway, I'll just fast forward a slightly bit until I just, it might be all that. This is the same object, and the black and white, black at the top and bottom is not on the object, it's just that it's a bright light, and this is what happens with videotape. bright object. It's a characteristic on the tape itself recording. And at one point in this, because this is stabilised, of course, and false colour enhanced to see if there's any colour in it. It was pure silver, white, no colour, and that's the false colour enhancing, which adds colour to it to try and see the shape of the object or the source of the bright illumination. This is another object. Oh no, this is the same object using a different method, and it shows that the object was actually pulsing and vibrating at the same time. And that was absolutely steady when it was on tripod. And you can see that it has some sort of a shape in the centre. The red part is the object itself. It seems to have a ring around it. And it fluctuates in brightness very slightly and pulsing and vibrating around the outside. You can see it vibrate. So that was a bit of a closer look in. You can see where it's got that ring around it just there? Yeah. But that was like small object, 3,000 foot altitude, and to get an image like that, to say that's a fair bit of processing. And with digital zoom, you're able to get that, but you still get that amount of break up there, which is the original image on tape is not as high quality as high definition digital. Now, a lady sent us in this bit of footage taken with her iPhone. And she said there's a little white object in front of the plane. She saw the vapour trail, so she videoed it. She's right out in the sticks, out in the desert. And she just took this bit of video and come down. And this is the original video she sent. See if you can see any UFOs. Or that's it. It's just an ordinary piece of video, but because she had a look at it frame by frame, she was able to pick up something interesting in it, which I'll show you next. I went for it frame by frame, and when in the frame, if I saw an anomaly or something there that was in the sky other than the aircraft, I put an arrow to point to it. The first little segment was 33 frames, which is just over 1 second at a 30th of a second taken. So this object moved as quick as this arrow moves in 1 second. That's following an object, that's slow motion now, that's 16 times slower than the original. And that object moved in that manner, in that distance, in 1 second. 33 frames. No, you won't see it here. And another one flew across there, a black object. You won't see it. I sent this to the lady to say, well, just have a look at this frame by frame. But I'm showing you just the arrows follow the object. There's 2 objects in that. That's a bit slower this time. One's a whitish object, the other one's a darker object. And that's 16 times slower than normal.
So we won't see it on there either? Or can we see it on there or we don't?
Well, you can if you look close enough, but because of the screen and the way it is, you might just see a little flickering of something there.
You see that one?
Yeah.
I see that one.
Yeah, I see that one.
I don't know what it is because the data is so, the object is so small, there's not enough data to work with or see anything, but it's just a matter of following it to see how quickly that moves in the flight path of it. There's some frames the object was not visible, and that's what UFOs do sometimes. They darken out. Yeah, they move and you don't see them for a few frames, and then they'll come back again. Rotation or fluctuation in the illumination. So I included those so that you see if it's jumped in that bit there was the object wasn't there. It moved down without being visible. But there's quite a few things there that she just took with her iPhone and studied it 1 frame at a time, and this came this came out. This was in the desert south of Alice Springs. But that's about all you can do with something like that. I mean, if I had my fractal zoom, I probably could have got a bit closer, but the object is so small, there's not a lot of digital data in there to zoom right up. This was a, you see underneath it, there's a, when it's stabilised, this was a handheld just about overhead. There's another little illumination underneath it. I hope you can see it there. There. And that was, when the concentric circles are like that with your false colour enhancing, it means that it's white light, like a star. There's no colour. It's bright, like blue-white, extremely bright. And it's got a flat edge there. And there is an indication that there is something joining that. So I don't know whether it's a UFO cylinder or whether it's some other type of craft with a protrusion out this side of it. Because at night in a black sky, you're lucky to get anything at all. Now this was an object that was only metres away from me, and it was what I call a particle plasma. It was an orb that was bronzy colour, and they had fingers of energy that had like dots. If you drew dots, that's why I call it a particle plasma type light. Anyway, I didn't know whether it was a hoax type thing that was fully illuminated, so I got a hoax garbage bag which I'd filmed, you know, 200 to 300 metres away from me, and this is it as a comparison for the analysis. So I've saturated the colour a bit, and you can see that it's the light is contained within a membrane, which is the garbage bag, and at the bottom now it's stabilised. You can see it's the flame jumping up and down inside this garbage bag. There's a man-made hoax device. There was a lot... pardon?
Chinese lantern?
Yeah, Chinese lantern type thing. There was lots and lots of these. I videoed and witnessed over 50 events of these during the 1990s. There was, I conclude there was an organised group letting these things off over populated areas, and they found that they were keeping the UFOs away from this town area. That's a comparison between the two, and I'm fully convinced this one on the left was a, even though it was a similar colour, it was a UFO, a genuine UFO, because a flame, if it was an object or a ball on fire, you would get the flame coming up. It would be totally different to that. But I saw with my eyes, and the needles of plasma type, particle plasma I call it, was unusual, very unusual. So that's another type of research and comparison. This is a super close-up zoom of that same orb object, and you can see the blue part is the actual hottest part of the object, and it's a round sphere, and the different colours is a different brightnesses coming from the object once it's illuminated like it is. And that's slowed down a little bit so you can see it a bit better. Yeah, it can be interesting if you can get some results. Okay, I've got 15 minutes to go. And that's what the garbage bag looks like, and you can see the obvious flame in here. There's fingers of flame going up inside the bag. So that's proof evidence that it's a hoax device, man-made hoax device. All right, we'll get out of that and we'll go to the next one. This was just a cluster of 3 or 4 objects with a black one attached to it, just slowly going across the sky and seemed to move. And this was a disc-shaped object that was on end, of orangey colour, and it took 1 minute just to come slowly over exactly where I was standing, and I videoed it, and it looked like it had a membrane moving around inside it. Another object that was rolling around with black objects attached to it. It was just sort of just rolling around as it moved in the sky. And this was the typical daytime sightings that were during the 2000s, similar to the Mexican type footage that was filmed over there, the flotilla footage. These are sorts of things that you see in the daytime if you're lucky enough to witness one. Skyfish and rods. Anybody familiar with rods or the skyfish? Yeah. I did some research because that came out in the 90s when people started to get their video cameras and starting to film these things. And Jose Esquimal from America brought to his attention, and he thought, well, these things are real critters, you know, like they're in the sky and I'm videotaping these critters, and he called them skyfish or rods. And I thought, well, yeah, what are these things? So I did my own testing on them with different cameras, and I was able to establish that they're insects with motion blur. And this is a bit of footage that explains that. That's their movement of insects flapping its wings at a slow shutter speed, normal camera, in daylight it's flapping when the wings flap. And that's another one. That's an insect leaving a motion trail, and even that one is a different one. It's still an insect of some sort, and this is how they do it. Just hide the sun behind the eaves of the house and start videoing, and you'll get insects coming up. And you'll start to see that that's insects leaving a motion trail. And these are the things they were calling rods, thinking that that was the actual creature itself, you know. But it's not. It's a movement of an insect. See, that's just an insect. And because of the shutter of the camera, I did a whole video on explaining the shutter speed of the camera and all that sort of stuff, and explained how this happens. But that's another one, was much faster and closer to the camera, therefore it's longer, you know. There's another, that's a good one. That's the sort of thing that they were calling these rods. But in fact, I tried them with 10,000 shutter speed on a high quality camera, and it was stop motion and showed that they're insects. And this is what they're doing. The 10,000 second was a high 8 camera I did 10,000ths of a second, and it was still motion blur. So the quality of the camera was paramount in getting positive results. Just because it's 10,000 a second doesn't mean it's a good 10,000th of a second. And it's like that. The shutter speed as the tape is going through the camera, and that determines motion blur. The faster the shutter speed, the less motion blur. And these are all the things that you have to do your research, study, and demonstrate and put to the test and prove to yourself this is what's actually happening, and be able to show that's a reason why these rods are. That's just an animation to a demonstration of the different shutter speeds. I'll go just jump a little bit forward. That's a demonstration of just a winged object, and each time you can imagine that at speed, and that would determine the motion blur of the object depending on how fast the wing movement was, and the shutter speed. It all works together. I just finished filming one night a hoax device that was like a weather balloon. It was a big round balloon, obviously full of helium, and it had something underneath it that was illuminated, like burning. And I saw this thing coming, and I thought, oh yeah, film that, you know, like. And anyway, when I went behind the cloud, a break in the cloud, I could see that it was a round weather balloon type thing with something underneath it. I knew it was a hoax device thing. And I still had the camera rolling, and I look around, and here comes this UFO that was about 1,000 foot above me, and it was a large silver white object that was a blue white. It was so pure white, it was bluish. So I started to film it. But the funny thing is, somewhere along the time I did that, I've lost 3 minutes, because I had the time on the camera, and I know I had the film, and I thought to myself, oh, lucky I had the camera rolling still, and I straight away did it. But somewhere in that time on the thing, there's 3 minutes gone. And I said, 3 minutes? There's no way I stood there for 3 minutes after that object went, before I filmed that. So I can't explain where 3 minutes went. But this is the object. And this is only about 1,000 foot away altitude, or maybe even less when I first seen it. It was coming just slightly to the west of me, and I stabilised it, and it was just enormous, so bright. And that's the colour it came out. That's, you know, I did that full colour enhancing to try and see the shape of the object, and that's when it was going away. It might have been a little under 3 kilometres away, but that was behind, a view from behind it. It was still bright and at low altitude. Going pretty quick. And so that was pretty amazing. I just happened to be there at the time, and where the 3 minutes went, I don't know. But anyway, I want to show you a last piece of footage taken by one of our members, John, up the back there. He's been setting his camera up and filming, and then going through, letting the camera roll, and going through the footage to see if he can capture anything, which is the hard way to do it, mate. But anyway, he's got success here, and we'll show you. Now, it's in the top left-hand corner. You'll see it go diagonally across the left-hand corner, a blue orb. It looks blue orb. From the left-hand corner, it's going up. You watch. There, that. See that? Now, that's a daytime UFO, in my opinion, because I've videotaped them myself. I'll play it again. Yeah, it goes up here. There. Right, now that's a good little capture there, but John didn't see it at the time, did you, mate? Didn't see it? No. That's good, but there's a difference between putting a camera up and just recording, hoping something's there and being able to see it. Now, with my experience with that type of object in the daytime, that event may have gone for hours that day. And to see that object, I always say, if you see one object, keep looking because there's more. Particularly in the daytime. That's a daytime wave of UFOs. And that little object I had that was rolling around with the black object, that was a wave, and that was probably from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Went for hours. And I was able to get a fair bit of footage. So ideally, it is to go out and personally see what's the sky, and if you see something, then video it, because you'll get it from you'll get 8 minutes at least, usually, and you might even get 20 minutes like I did with one of those others. But there might be more, you know, like if you ever see them, keep watching, because that's how they come in waves. Anyway, I think I've just about finished it here. Well, I'll call it a night then, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.